Okay. Okay, so recording has started. Thank you, Sanchita, for agreeing for to interview this, and that is really nice. So Sanchita has been a leader in the tech industry. I have worked with her, and she's been doing amazing work, whether it's related to tech or maybe influencing people to join the sustainability community in tech. And there are like so many other things. So maybe Sanchita, can you share your journey as a leader in technology sector and what really inspired you to grow and enter this field? Like maybe you can just rewind yourself in past and let us know.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm super like happy that I could be part of something like this. Talking about journey as a leader. So I was born and brought up in Himachal Pradesh, right? Always being closer to nature, and I think leadership is not something that you can, like, it's something that you feel inspirational about. You look at your parents, you look at your teachers, you look at your like organization members, you look at your peers. So I don't think leadership is only about in your organization. So for me, the journey of being a leader actually probably started from my school time, when at one point of time you were made a class monitor, or at one point of time you were given a certain responsibility. And I think how you take that responsibility over time, are you meticulous with it? Do you have attention to detail? Are you able to catch hold of things which are very important? Are you able to analyze the risks and everything, right? So I think a lot of these things are kind of how you do events in college as well, right? So a lot of this had happened over years, which then kind of prepares you once you enter an organization. And then you also have some contracts through which you can see ki, acha yaar, this is how uh, senior people are doing things at work, right?
Mhm.
So if you have developed those observation skills across all these years in your school and college, it comes as handy. And if you've done a bunch of things back in your school and college, you're kind of very naturally able to adapt to a lot of things. So one of the things that I also feel is that when you grow into your journey as a leader, there's some things that you'll know, and there's some things that you will learn, right? So, naturally you will be good at certain things. So for example, for me, I was always a very meticulous person. If somebody
Mhm.
had given me some responsibility, they would never have to come to me. I would always go back to them, right? It was something that I've learned from my parents and from my teachers back in school. But today I think this is something that comes very naturally to me, and it's natural because there has been practice in terms of 18 to 20,
Mhm.
21 years of sorts, right? So that's one thing. And I think, but there are also other things like that I think I have grown into. Like,
Mhm.
I have always been a very excited person, which means that there were times when I'm extremely excited about something, but maybe I'm not paying attention to what other person is saying because I'm so full of excitement, right? So I think when I started to observe a lot of other people in my surroundings, at my workplaces, or even beyond, right? People that you interact with, who you admire as leaders, be it on internet or like in your surroundings. um, when you look at them, what makes them special, and when you really see that, oh my god, this quality is something that I would really love to have over time, because this is how this person made me feel, right?
Mhm.
I think you also start to learn a lot of those skills. So listening skills didn't come naturally
Mhm.
as much. It was not absent, but it was not at its best, right? So I think that's there. And I think I don't feel that there is any inspiration that you need to enter. I think it's always there.
Mhm.
Different people will show leadership qualities in their life in different ways. Some people will show it in organizations, some people will show it in their friend circles, some people will show it in their houses, taking that stepping
Mhm.
up to be that person who takes certain ownership. So I think for me it's not just an organizational concept.
So basically when you were a child and student, so it started from that you were really influenced by people who were taking up the responsibilities, and you started taking up those responsibilities as well. So I
Yeah.
think it started that way. So on that note, I have a question. So how much do you think your family, friends, and schooling influenced your journey? You really did mention about it, but now when you are connecting the dots, do you really think it had a lot to play in your journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of things that, as I was saying, right? A lot of things that people feel are so natural to me today, they were not natural since childhood. It
Yeah.
is a practice of those, like from all the way from like fifth, sixth standard probably until the end of college. What are the things that I used to practice day in and day out, right? It is a culmination of a lot of those things, and I think family played a very big role because both my parents were teachers, right?
Mhm.
So that was a very big role. My brother at that point of time had a very big role because we both used to discuss every single thing that would happen in school. Okay.
Mhm.
So all the way from all the thing, like I think we both were also very proactive kids. Like we would always study things beyond curriculum,
Mhm.
would participate in a bunch of stuff, and that would need a lot of courage and leadership. And I think I would not say leadership. It needed a lot of courage to go and ask certain questions from your teachers which are not in your syllabus.
Mhm.
And it also needed a lot of, like, acceptance from my teachers' side that, you don't have to just follow the curriculum. You can always ask questions beyond. And
Yeah.
because my parents were also teachers, so they kind of enabled a lot of those things. So a lot of very basic qualities of leadership, like courage to ask, like articulating your thoughts in the way so that other person does not have to interpret or read between the lines. You have to go with a certain thought clarity to ask a particular set of questions, right? A lot of these things came because we were participating in a lot of other activities. Or I can also tell you, way back in college we used to do a lot of events, right? When
Mhm.
you do a lot of events, you understand the organizational skills. So a lot
Mhm.
of things around, okay, how do you quickly build an Excel to organize a 2 day like workshop, right? That's a very basic skill that kind of teaches you how to do a lot of stuff in your day to day in engineering as an engineering leader. Like the first thing that everybody approaches is a process and an Excel, right?
Mhm.
So I think a lot of these small things and very unrelated things kind of influenced a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like so on this note, I remember like there was this one person, actress. I was just checking that. So there was this one person who received an award at global level. I think it's America. So she mentioned that she feel privileged that she is able to receive that award because of the environment she has been in, and it has influenced her career and given her position. And I think she mentioned about some region which has ongoing war like since long time, and she mentioned that maybe someone will be as talented as this person, but they don't have the opportunity, or maybe they don't have those circumstances. So what's your take on it? Because, and that's why I asked this question about schooling, family and friends. So what's your take on it? How can we influence people on in in those environment where maybe where they do not have proper opportunities?
Yeah, I myself also feel extremely privileged because through and through. So I was born and brought up in a very cosmopolitan setup, and a lot of things related to gender bias, which is what we are going to talk about as well later. Um, I had not understood until I joined workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So the two reasons for that: I was brought up in a city called Palampur. Palampur
Mm-hmm.
is an education hub. So there are four universities like
Mm-hmm.
horticulture, agriculture, basic sciences, veterinary sciences, and a CSIR, right? So most of the people around me when I was like growing up, somebody was from Tamil Nadu. One of my father's best friend was from Orissa.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was from UP and Bihar, right? So like when you grow up seeing such diverse set of people, you then understand how to, like, deal in different situations in different ways. What is sensitive to ask, what is insensitive, what is not sensitive to talk about, right? And then something very similar happened when I went to like college, because most our gender ratio in college was also really great. Like in JP, I think a lot of students used to come from like the UP region, the NCR region, right? A lot of girls also coming from there, and there was all, and I think Himachal is generally very good with respect to girl ratio in terms of education, right? So it was not until I joined Blinkit
Mm-hmm.
that for the first time I saw ki, oh my god, it is a matter of privilege that I am one of the very few girls who's getting to
Mm-hmm.
be in this setup, right? Earlier it was always through and through, okay my god, like maybe such things exist in the world, but not these things never existed in my world.
Mm-hmm.
Having said this, I think the first step towards, like, influencing people is first of all acknowledging that you had a privilege.
Yeah.
If you don't acknowledge you have a privilege, and then you cannot go and, like, act according to it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the first step is to know where you are, right? And only then you can kind of influence change, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
know you have come from a privileged background in certain ways, accept it, be very grateful to your circumstances. And I
Yeah.
think, like, there will always be somebody who will look at your circumstances and feel that, oh wow, look at this person, how they have achieved it, right? So if you can kind of inspire people to feel that way, right, always do it. And you don't have to do it in a very big fashion. You can do it in a very small way. Like, I still remember way back in college, we used to have these, like, like programming, like teaching programming to juniors sessions, right? That's such a small way of inspiring people, right? I still remember there were juniors who would come 2 3 years later and say, "Ki, oh, like, just because I saw you doing this, right, I did it this year," right? So
Yeah.
a lot of these big steps start from small steps, and
Mhm.
the influence can only happen when you go out there, present things, teach things to people, influence them, right? So I think that is probably the best way you can do
Yeah,
it.
that's a very small, I mean, that's a very good thing which you mentioned, like doing small things, it
Yeah,
eventually leads to bigger things.
yeah,
And I think what you really mentioned, acknowledging that you come from you have privilege, and like acknowledging your circumstances, that also really helps you to move one step ahead, and helping other people. So
yeah,
I really loved it, Sanchita. So moving ahead, because you mentioned that your environment was different, and when you joined your first organization, it really hit you. You basically come to the gender bias, not gender bias, I'm sorry, like the
uh,
gender ratio. You saw the gender ratio very skewed for the very first time. And I think for me as well, like I think I experienced it, I think, first time when going to the organization. I think for some reason that is always one of the first point where you see the gender ratio difference. For me also, I think it never happened in my schooling and university. So, I mean, like, what kind of gender related barriers you have seen in your careers? Because obviously the ratio difference will create a bit of, it creates a difference, like even in power dynamics. Because like I've been taking negotiation class and women and leadership class, and we have seen the case studies that majority of people always tend to have more power. It's just the power dynamics thing. Like when people are negotiating or when people are in group discussion, there's like the majority set of people, they have like the power somehow. So have you encountered like any gender related barriers in your career, and if you did, like how did you overcome that? It could be very small thing, like as I mentioned, the power dynamics or
yeah.
other things.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that was my philosophies from very early on, since I realized this, and actually even before, was always that I'm an engineer. If
Mm.
I'm going into the role of an engineer, I'm an engineer, that's it. How would I, what would I evaluate myself as an engineer on the basis of? What are the metrics, or what are, like, at that point of time I was not aware of the term metrics,
Yeah.
but what is the success criteria? When would somebody call me a good engineer,
Yeah.
right? They, like, probably there will be people who will bias it on the basis of a girl or a boy, but if there is somebody who is really smart,
Mm-hmm.
what is that criteria that they would use? Like, generally in my head, the criteria number one was, can you write good code? Can you actually go and communicate things right on time?
Mm-hmm.
And like three four other things around, are you able to learn new things and like bring them to use fast enough in a startup environment, right? So a bunch of these things I realized very like early on, and I was like, you don't have to complicate it further beyond this, right?
Mhm.
But this does not mean that the such barriers do not exist. This was my way of realizing what would give me happiness.
Yeah.
Okay. Over time, I was also very fortunate to have a lot of women around me who were very like open minded,
Mm-hmm.
who had broken those barriers, but at the same time who also understood that these barriers do exist, right? Sometimes when we are so strong headed, right, as I think I have been, you tend to ignore these things because you really want are in that, like, in that mindset of going ahead and breaking that barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So while when you are strong headed, it gives you an advantage, but it is also not possible for everybody to do it in that way, right? It feels like an unfair circumstance, right? um, Another thing I think that was like, and it's not just woman leader who kind of inspired me to do all of this. There were so many men in my like previous organization who made me overcome this. So it was not that you are just getting inspired by women, but it was also a lot of those men who were very confident in my abilities, who went ahead and said that give this girl an opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was one of the other things that gave me a confidence in terms of how to overcome these things. Very honestly speaking, other than organization in my life as well, all the people who have actually played a very like crucial role other than my mother was my father, my brother, my husband, and my nana, right? All the men, right?
Yeah.
So I think it is also, I was also very fortunate that I had a lot of men who had created such environment for me to kind of overcome gender related barriers, right? Now coming back to the first question, have I encountered any such barriers? um I think, like, yes, but maybe I was not aware at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you look back at it, at one point of time somebody asked me, uh when I was interviewing for a company, that do you um are you planning for a kid, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh and at that point of time I was like, you cannot ask me this question, and this is not cool. But
Yeah.
what was very interesting about this conversation was that this person actually, when I told them that this is not cool, they kind of tried to explain their situation and
Mm-hmm.
accepted that maybe they were wrong, right? So
Oh, that's.
even though they had made that mistake, they were like, they did not know what is the right articulation, but then they kind of tried to explain their point in a way so that I don't feel offended further, and they
Mm-hmm.
were also ready to make amends so that they learn things in future, right?
Yeah.
And I genuinely feel that this is what most people need. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it is very much about that women don't understand men, or like we absolutely hate people who do wrong things. I think we all are ignorant at times, like even
Mm-hmm.
women are ignorant at times of other women as well, right?
Yeah.
That very small acknowledgement, whenever somebody can highlight it to you, can take you a very long way. So
Yeah.
I think, and I think, yeah, this is something that was a great example of that over time.
Yeah.
But
That's.
like, as I think about it, what are other gender barriers? I don't know, yeah, maybe I think I lack awareness of it, because
Mm-hmm.
I was always surrounded by people who only who only kept pushing me forward. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever these things also happened, I think I never, like, I always moved on probably. Like I
Yeah.
would have thought about those things for a moment, that are these things gender related? But then, because there were so many cheerleaders around me,
Mm-hmm.
I would always like go ahead and like kind of keep working hard towards the actual outcome.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, but like in initially when you mentioned like you feel like you always have been strong headed. So, do you think, like, because do you think this could be some sort of cognitive distortion, like coming from like you have to work hard, and maybe this is kind of like basically being too hard on yourself? Like, maybe do you think this is somewhere coming from that? If you reflect back on this,
Haha, absolutely. I think there may be some portion of gender awareness to it. So I'll give you an example. So when I had joined Blinkit in the early times, there it was, so it was not that the gender ratio was really bad. I'll be very
yeah,
honest with you.
yeah,
Gender ratio in engineering specifically was really bad. Product was great, analytics was great,
hmm,
right? Like certain other marketing functions was great,
yeah,
HR was great, right? Which means that there are certain functions which was amazing. QA was great,
yeah,
right? But then core engineering was not what we all felt, like, where it could be. And
yeah,
then came Karthik, who was also trying to do this visa. Our leader was also
hmm,
trying to do a lot of like initiatives around that, and I think every leader in the tech leadership was trying their hand towards it. I think Devika was also like very
yeah,
specifically looking out at these initiatives, right? So I think the intention was definitely there towards the later half, but in the first half, all four of us, right, would always wonder if it is because there not enough girls who are like kind of there, right? And when we would go out and interview, sometimes we would also feel very bad because sometimes it was genuine lack of skills.
hmm, okay,
And
yeah,
maybe it is not the problem of those girls, it can probably be a problem of exposure,
yeah,
right? So
exactly,
I think a lot of and I think that strong headedness for us came from there,
yeah,
because we
makes
were also subconsciously probably very worried ki yaar, oh my god, maybe we have reached here. Is it talent, skill? Maybe it is skill right now, but are we ready for like the market?
hmm, makes
are
sense.
we are we genuinely there? Maybe this organization felt that we were good enough, but will
Hmm,
market feel that way for us? So right,
hmm,
I think at that point of time it became a very self-conscious thing, sort of, which kind of helped us as well. It was a being that strong-headed that I have to crack it was a
yeah.
great thing as well. But yeah, I think this is why I feel that
I
there was a
maybe
subconscious.
yeah, that's actually good, Sanchita. Maybe somewhere you want to set up a good example so that people
Correct.
can basically see you and like they somehow know the path how to overcome that. And honestly, like I've also seen your journey and it really does help. So I think that's a very good answer. But like on this note, like maybe I want to touch upon a point. So we were going through this one of the case study, which is unmasking manly men. And there was one conversation in class where someone mentioned, and this somehow relates to me as well because in my team, in my so I was function of DevOps team, and I was the only woman there. And I felt that because so I've seen like there are in every organization there are certain breaks, right, which you take in between, like chai sutta break or some sort of breaks which you take. So and generally I've seen that somehow this goes towards more like men are generally part of it. This is somehow even I experienced, and I feel like that really affects somehow because those breaks are required to make a bonding, some sort of bonding. I'm not saying like there were a lot of other people also who made feel inclusive, but somehow because of the gender ratio this happens like unintentionally. So do
Mm.
you think this really affects? Because I feel like for a person who is very shy or a person who doesn't, for them it's very difficult to be part of group. I think there it can really affect them, their energy, because and it can affect the dynamics of working, and eventually I think it can affect in other ways. For example, someone wants to get promoted, so they might not know how to present themselves better or to their seniors. Somehow I feel like these skills somehow like gets piled up, and it can affect people reaching to the leadership position. So what are your comments? I mean, this is just my opinion from my side of view. I'm happy to listen to your opinion. Like, what's your opinion on this?
Um, so yeah, it is a very interesting question, and very honestly, I don't know. Somehow, as you were talking about, like, as you're talking about this, one of the things that was going through my mind was usually promotions are majorly about making your work visible.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yes.
a lot of people are able to do that because they're good storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are able to do it in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
uh, some people will probably do it because they have great bonding with the manager, right? I think I always felt very personally, like, and I think it came over time only as a learning, is that like chai sutta breaks and all these kind of places can get you only to a certain extent. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was in my year 2 or 3 of my journey, and a lot of my friends were making switches to different companies, and they all were like, yaar 3 years ho gaye hain ab is company mein, please like figure out, you also figure out, everybody is getting a great hike. I
Mm-hmm.
think at that point of time I had a good retrospection with myself, and I was like, if I have like if my career is going to be like 20-30 year long period, right? It will not matter what will happen in these 2-3 years, right? What will
Mm-hmm.
matter is what are those habits that will sustain for a really good amount of time, which will give me edge over people in the long run, not
Mm-hmm.
like today, right? So then I started asking this question a lot from myself, that okay, some people will have an unfair advantage over me,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what is that unfair advantage that I will build for myself, that is so visible to everybody,
Yeah.
that you cannot, that it's impossible to ignore. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it came only after I there was one point of time when I did not get a hike.
Okay.
And I was like, how can you do this to me? For a student who has already always been meticulous, like, topper in class kind of a person, always doing great things when she was in Gurgaon. Suddenly, like, somebody tells you that you're not getting any hike this time because we don't think you've done great work, and nobody ever told you anything in that 1 year,
Yeah.
right? It was extremely shocking, and I think that's where great mentors also come into picture. So Ankur, who was my like mentor back then, he came and he told me that, you want hike, we can pitch for you, we can tell that, but do
Mm-hmm.
you want hike in that manner, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would want it at your terms. And
Yeah.
I think that conversation pushed me to think really about what is that, like, how can I turn this bad time into a great time?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe somebody will have an unfair advantage, but what will be my unfair advantage that I will like get by working so hard or like so smart that other people can't replicate? It is like how you build your businesses, right? How do
Mm-hmm.
you build an innovation that is so hard to copy that people keep trying but they can't, right? So having said all of this, yes, all these things happen. Like, and very interestingly, as you were talking about chai sutta breaks,
Mm-hmm.
I think most of my breaks were with these people who would go on chai sutta. They would have chai sutta and I would probably have lemon tea,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So, and now that you were talking about it, I also felt that, oh my god, like during our journey, did we skip anyone who would never talk about this,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, interest, like I think this is a very true observation. And I think
Yeah.
I think external factors, a lot of things can happen, and of course we have to address this as an organizations, as workplaces. But what is in your control? Because
Mm.
you can't, like, you can always go and make, like, propose changes in the organization. You can
Yeah.
always push those changes, you can always make your voice heard. This
Yeah.
is what leadership is for, right? Leadership should stand for it. But as an individual, when you are in that company, right, I would always want people to think about that as well.
Mm.
Because as we can highlight, like, it is very much similar to political systems, right? Where you would cast your vote, you can highlight what your issues are, but some changes will take time.
Will take.
So during that time, will you stop and not do anything for yourself? No, because ultimately it's not going to hit as hard for other people as much as it will hit you, right? So figure out, while you are trying to raise these issues, while you're trying to take a stand and fight for these issues,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that you will do for yourself, so that you are at a strategic advantage, so that people also listen to you more. Because
Mm.
when they will see that you have kind of done certain actions and you've kind of overcome that barrier,
Yeah.
people will hear your voice because they feel that you've done something in life, right?
Hmm.
So I always think about these two things in this manner. It is very similar to a political system in my head.
Yeah.
You have to take care of both the parts and not just one.
Yeah. So that's a very good answer. And you feel like this will change when we start acknowledging, like the leaders will start acknowledging and making changes in the organization.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was doing this one podcast, which is public as well, like on women in cloud native YouTube. So there's this one leader, women leader in one of the organizations. She has been great. And she was telling me one story that they were having, like, she was telling me about some other person, some other women, and they were having this discussion, ongoing discussion for a long period of time, very informal, after meetings. And then those group eventually walked through, they went till the washrooms, and a lot of men like went to the men washroom, and because like most of them were men. So and this they were still discussing that thing in the washroom as well. So that this women, like, it's kind of funny, she went to the men washroom and she said, because you are continuing this discussion, so I just came inside. So I feel like it's a very funny thing, but I think she kind of fought for it, and she, in a very funny way, she make them realize that, hey, you need to be more inclusive. So I mean, and she also mentioned, like, that she really hopes for the time when it doesn't happen, when she doesn't have to, when we don't have to do this anymore. But I guess, like, till then, there will be people like her, you pointing it out, then only this will change. So yeah, on this, because we have discussed a lot in this side, and like the technology sector has been male dominated, and like a lot of other sectors, and I think it's changing. So have you seen any change over the years? What are your
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think between 2017 to the time when you joined Blinkit,
yeah.
it was such a huge shift, to be honest. At one point of time, it was four engineers, four girl engineers, like
Mhm.
hardcore engineers. And then, like, suddenly it was you, Shivangi, Ekta, bunch of other girls as well. It felt really interesting. It felt really nice. And yeah, so I think a lot of change has happened because a lot of people have worked hard towards it,
Yeah.
right? Not only just people but organizations also. I remember at one point of time during our college time only,
Yeah.
Ericsson came to our college to hire only girls.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
And there was so much bashing left, right, center that everybody around the college was doing, that, oh my god, why is it so? Why only girls? Why not give everybody an equal opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was such a, like, we were probably not so mature back then. We could not understand that situation back then. But a lot of changes happened because a lot of people have made such efforts,
Yeah.
right? It was only because a lot of women got that opportunity. Like, I genuinely feel that I got that opportunity thanks to Blinkit,
Yeah.
right? Thanks to Blinkit for hiring us so that today we can talk about this, right? Thanks to a lot of other people who we worked alongside, who
Yeah.
actually were very proactively vocal about making us the leaders,
Mm. Yeah.
right?
Agree.
Like, I think people like Vedic, people like Karthik, Somin always stood, like, behind us.
Yeah.
Like, instead of keeping us behind, they were the ones who made us stand ahead so that we can be those people, right?
Yeah.
We can be ready for those leadership roles, right? So I think this has definitely changed over the years, but having said that, there's also a lot more change that needs to happen.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of um like, I think, like, maybe we have kind of solved this in certain privileged areas. It needs to disseminate across different layers of different kinds of populations, right? So I think the work is definitely not done, but there has been huge progress.
That's amazing. That's really nice. And I totally agree. Like, there are some initiatives and some organization which give an opportunity, and that's actually improving. Because I remember, like, back in university, even there were like so many men and like women, like, who used to be angry at these initiatives, that why do we have like just diversity initiative, And I really wish like they understand it now, because back then people were really angry. But I think like over the years we can see that why these initiatives exist and how it has been changing the overall dynamics. And I think it's needed. Maybe those initiatives can have like, there's a scope of improvement in every initiative. Maybe
Yeah.
that has, but I think acknowledging that it is required and it's helping is important, and I really hope now people can acknowledge it.
Yeah. I
um,
think the definition of diversity, one of the interesting changes that I have seen over the years is the definition of diversity has evolved so much. Earlier, it was just about men and women, right?
it has changed.
Like nothing about transgender getting employed, right? Nothing about like people with special abilities getting employed, right? It was so nice to see this time when I was traveling from Indigo, that the person who does the stamping and everything with respect to a boarding pass, right? That person was like not able to hear properly, so there was a batch and everything, but then he is employed via them. A lot of Uber drivers also like that we have found in India, right? So the definition of diversity,
Has
not only in these areas but also in technology sector, has improved over time, right? So I think I feel very lucky to have seen that change, and I think I really feel that we still have a long way to go and we'll be there.
Yeah, definitely. So, on the top of it, like, how has your leadership style evolved over time? Because you mentioned that, like, slowly you started, like, initially when you joined, you first time encountered the gender ratio difference. And slowly, like, when you were getting supported by a lot of good people, like, later on in your life, you realize that it all happened because of, I mean, they were like anchors as well in your life. So, I'm pretty sure like now you have awareness. And so do you think like your leadership style evolved over time, and do you feel your gender has influenced, or maybe the awareness that this thing exists has influenced this evolution?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I think our biologies are different. So women are slightly differently wired than men biologically,
Yeah.
right? Which means that certain things men will have more advantages, and in
Mhm.
certain areas women will have more advantages, right? For example, empathy to a lot of women comes naturally,
Yeah.
right? And then I think what happens over time, right? Men are slightly more goal oriented in general, right? But what happens over time when you keep playing a certain role over and over and over again, you learn how to, first of all, index on qualities that make you special.
Yeah.
Some of it can come from gender, some of it can come from upbringing, some of it can come from your circumstances, your like things that you have seen in your lifetime, etc., etc. But gender definitely plays a role in it, right? And for the things that you are probably not so good at, which probably the other gender might be good at, you
Yeah.
learn to develop those skills as well. So today if you'll ask me, Sanchita, are you not really good at goal setting, etc., I don't think I would say yes to that,
Mm-hmm.
because I've seen a lot of people and a lot of leaders around me do that time and again, making me do that again and again, and helping me do that again and again, right? So while gender has a lot of influence, I think certain things will come like will come naturally, and certain things will come with practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how has my leadership style evolved over time? I think I I am somebody who is generally empathetic but also authoritarian at times when I feel that this situation demands in that way. But having seen certain leaders who have been extremely empathetic, right? uh, I genuinely also do a lot of retrospectives and then go back, uh, and analyze situations from multiple angles now. Earlier, I used to follow my natural style. Now, I think I try to assess what style would fit better in this situation,
Yeah.
right? Another thing that I think is very interesting that I think Jacob and Karthik used to talk a lot in Blinkit days was servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of leadership, a lot of times, people is that you are the leader, people are following you, right? Which is why a lot of conversations around influence, but no conversations about those people teaching you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when like these both folks introduced me to the idea of servant leadership, The whole idea was that you're here to serve the people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means that there is no concept of followers,
Yeah.
and there's no concept of somebody, one person leading and everybody else following. Rather, there's a concept of you saying that, okay, I'm here to help you. Tell
Mm-hmm.
me, how can I help you? Right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these interesting leadership paradigms I've gotten introduced to a lot of these paradigms, and like it is a very humbling experience that way, because then you understand that leadership is not that one thing that we get influenced over LinkedIn by, when
Yeah.
somebody sees a CEO doing XYZ number of things and then there's a PR stunt that happens. A lot of organizations do that, like
Yeah.
especially the organizations that are built on the marketing layers, right? A lot of them do that,
Yeah.
right? And that may be one of the that may be a leadership style, but that's only one form of leadership style. Do you associate with it? If you do not, then there are many options available. You do
Yeah.
not have to have only that kind of organization which where there is so much charisma
Yeah.
that everybody is so awed by the very aura of that one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the only style. There are times when you find the entire leadership team, not everybody is charismatic, but when you look at that entire team in one go, you're like, oh my god, they all fit so perfectly in this puzzle. So I think I have seen organizations like that as well. And I think they, because they complement each other really well, it's also because their leadership styles are also slightly complementary to each other, right?
Yeah.
So I think yes.
Yeah. Again, we talk about, like, it's not gender, but we talk about diversity in leadership styles. And I think we
Yeah,
really need it, because let's say if some leader is too, I mean, if some, for example, I don't want to name this person, but like there are some leaders who are too money minded, and like they don't pay much attention to the empathy part. And I think, like, if everyone starts becoming that, I mean, maybe this is good, like, for the business, and it's a good thing, and we can pick that quality from that person, but maybe that person also has a scope of improvement in like other sectors. Like, for example, like, if I see myself, like, I've worked under many leaders, and I think every time I've worked with those people, I have picked up really good qualities. Like, I remember, like, in my previous organization, only like the co-founder was the leader, and he in my opinion, he understood diversity problems much more better than any other leader I've seen, like, even the women leaders. So we definitely need, it's just like not just the women who understand women problems, maybe sometimes they
correct.
don't. It's that it could be the man also, and that person really understood problems, and he tried to mold himself like accordingly, and tried to encourage. That was too evident, and that really pushed me further. So that is something which is definitely really really important, as you mentioned. So moving on next, like, what are the most significant challenges women face in technology, like particularly in leadership roles, because we see less women in leadership roles.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Yet truth be spoken, like there is still, like not only in India but across the world,
Yeah.
people still think the moment a girl hits somewhere closer to 25, 26, and they are in a workplace, people start thinking, when will she get married? And it's a question that I have discussed a lot with other women in the ecosystem. The first question comes in form of, when you get married. Maybe somebody will not ask it directly to you, but in their head they're constantly evaluating, okay, if she gets married she might leave, her husband may not allow it, or
Mm.
she might take a transfer, because always the priority for the career of a man is usually given. So
Yeah.
then for 90 to 95% of women population, this may still hold true, right?
Yeah.
uh, and then I think, uh, like once that is done, dusted, then comes the maternity angle, right? So I think, this clock in people's head, especially in leadership, especially in the leadership folks, right? Oh my god, somebody is going to not be available for next 6 months, and I'm
Mhm.
also paying them as well. As a startup, how do I afford that, right? That's a question that comes to so many people's heads, especially in startups, I feel. And I think it is the responsibility of leadership. I've seen some women, like there was somebody in my team only where I saw that person struggling uh, after coming back to work because nobody was understanding their situation. I think that's where empathy is required, and I think that's something that startups find extremely hard to do because they're actually genuinely fast paced, but at the same time, like I think it's a very hard problem to solve. So I will not say that it's not. You also, like, at one point of time, as much as I empathized with this person, I could also understand the perspective of the people who were running the startup, right?
Hmm.
But I think a better way forward is always the one where you can actually solve the problem and not look at the problem itself and then find alternative solutions, right? So i think I think if you're somebody who is, I've always felt that if you're somebody who wants to achieve something, you want to make something happen, you will find a way. So when I
Hmm.
was working with her, I was like, okay, I know this is not working out. What's the alternate? What is that one role that will give you that edge? And I was very lucky because my manager also understood it.
Yeah.
And then all, like, it was very easy to transition her into a very different kind of a role. And to be very honest, she's still part of that role and leading that team successfully now for almost like 2020, 4 5 years,
That's
right?
amazing.
Yeah, so now I'm extremely proud of her, like super super duper proud. She's always somebody who would always come back. Even today she would message and ping and ask things. But I'm superbly happy that, like, me and my manager could be there for her.
Yeah.
And I think just by doing that, like, I think one story was written differently, and now she's going to write so many stories differently because she has experienced that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, the way I was talking about Vedic, Kartik, Somin, and a lot of these people, right? They did it for me. Now I owe it to a lot of other people, right? So because they have done it for me, I have to make sure that I pay it forward. I
Yeah.
think that's the way I feel about it. So these challenges are very true.
Hmm.
There's so many initiatives where people are trying to bring women, and I think, like, very honestly speaking, like, when you're going through this phase, you also need that time and energy for yourself, right? Which means that a lot of women also voluntarily want to, like, leave leadership roles at that point of time, right? The question then becomes, like, how do we bring them back if they have an intention to come back?
Makes
Because
sense.
there's a lot of women who want to come back. Like, I have a friend who very frantically called me once, and she was like, I have a child who is now 1.5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I never had an issue until he was 1 year, because my workplace was so accommodative. But I had to move out of that organization, and now my current organization, even after so many pleads, the organization has kept a, like, timing of a US time zone,
Yeah.
right? Now neither I can be with my son in the early morning hours because I have
Mhm.
meetings with US folks. Neither I can be with him when he has to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And for the first time in, like so many years, like, for example, she was also including the time when she was pregnant with him. Uh, in that span of 2 to 3 years, she was like, this is the first time that I am thinking that I should probably leave
Hmm.
uh, the job. So should I leave the job? And if I leave the job, can I come back? Who
Hmm.
will take me? I'll have a gap. And she was extremely confused. She had a conversation with her husband, who was also very supportive, and he was like, do whatever you feel like, we are here to support you, we'll figure out a way later, you
Yeah.
can start your own business, etc., etc. But then see how one small change kind of disrupted the whole thing. The fortunate thing today is that the market is so huge that a lot of women will have opportunities in other places as well, right? So, like, I genuinely feel that the moment you feel this way, you also have to understand that, is this organization the right fit? uh,
Exactly.
like if it is not, then why are you suffering? Sometimes the circumstances are like that, that you can't make that change. How can you make your voice heard in the right forums?
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I think leadership has to be very much, like, attentive to these problems, because see, people who are suffering can only speak so much. My friend could have only gone to the HR, could have only told her leader to not include her in the US time shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it was kind of on the shoulders of the leaders, right? That how will they make it happen, or how, if they can't make that happen, how can they accommodate it? Like today morning only, I was talking to somebody who was looking out for a job, and this is a guy, okay?
Yeah.
uh, and I was like, you were looking out for job, I sent him one of the profiles, and I was like, this might be exciting for you, YouTube role, very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And he was like, I have paused looking out for some time. I was like, what happened? And he was like, one of my seniors, his mom is, like, one of my team leads who is also a senior, his mom is extremely sick. And
Mm-hmm.
now, uh, like, the company is not able to accommodate a lot of things. And then when I had that conversation with him, I felt like maybe, it's not the right time for me to move out,
Mm-hmm.
because that will put a lot of pressure on him. This
Yeah.
guy had no reason, to be very honest, to accommodate to this, right? But it was on a personal level that he was doing a lot of these things, right? I think sometimes these personal, like, ideally you should not have to do this personal level of things. But when somebody does this on a personal level, I think you also set a benchmark for leadership, in terms of,
Exactly.
okay, you can act, like, if I can do it on my personal level, then you as a leader, if you are not able to do it, like, that's a good mirror,
Yeah.
right? So I think sometimes you can take inspirations from a lot of these small small things which have a very big impact. I'm 100% sure that this person whose mom is sick is always forever going to be indebted, and is forever going to be a lifelong friend for this guy, right?
Mm.
No matter their current status today, right? So
Yeah.
uh, so sometimes, even if in circumstances leadership is not able to do, when people come together, you can do wonderful things. Yeah, I
Exactly.
genuinely believe in that. So, like, which is why you also need to have great relationships where you work.
Mm.
Like, talking to people who you have a personal connect with, and telling them this is why I'm not able to do something, is much more easier than talking to a person who you don't know.
Mm. Yeah.
And it is in part the role of leadership to ensure that there is a culture like that, where people can come and talk about their personal problems as well. Not in, like, not to an extent where it starts disturbing everything, but to an extent that people have that comfort, that they can come and share that something is going wrong, and then other people are kind of accommodating to it,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
That's really great, Sanchita. And I think I got a very good takeaway from this. Like when you mentioned like people need to come together and create a environment where people can genuinely discuss this, and also like setting up example so that others can get encouraged to come up and say
Yeah.
it when it is required.
So,
So
what, one of the very interesting things that I don't know if I read it or I was talking to someone about it, was, what is culture? Culture is 80% of what you see happening on the floor.
exactly,
So if
yes,
you're saying that, oh my God, our culture is, we are empathetic, and you're empathetic towards your customers but not your employees, then you are definitely not empathetic, because
yeah,
this is called selective empathy, right?
exactly.
So then this is
Wow.
not your culture.
Selective empathy. Nice. Yeah.
That is selective empathy, right? Because if you are empathetic, you would largely put yourself in shoes of others. When you
Hmm.
say others, in certain scenarios, that would be your, like, customers, but in other scenarios, it would be your employees,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you're not doing that with your employees and only doing with your customers, then you're not empathetic. You're just selectively empathetic
Selective.
towards the person who is willing to pay you for your business,
Yeah.
right? So I think, yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, that's amazing, Sanchita. Like even I learned about this new term today, selective empathy, and I think I'm gonna read more about it because I
I
feel
don't
like
know if there is a, like, I actually, this is what,
no,
I
this
don't know
is
if there is actual term like that, but I think of it in that manner
I think it
because
happens because, like, with me also on personal note, it happens. So I think there is a thing like this selective empathy, and you mentioned like people are just empathetic to customers and not
yeah.
employees. Like I've seen that happening too as well, like in many organizations. So definitely, this is something really good. I mean, it would be really nice if you can write about this. It would be
Okay.
wonderful. Yeah. But okay, so wrapping up, I just have like couple of questions because like we have already discussed about this a lot. So I think you have already mentioned about this, like one of the misconception about women in technology. You've given a wonderful example and also how it needs to be changed. But do you think there are more things that there are misconceptions about women in technology that, or maybe any other sector that needs to be addressed?
Okay. Miss हाँ यार मतलब I think there's still a lot of biases around. Okay, uh, if somebody speaks their mind, it
Hmm.
is very much like, why is she speaking so much? If they don't speak, then it is very much like, oh my god, maybe she's not ready for that role.
Yeah.
uh, maybe does not happen in all organizations, but I have noticed this. Also, I think a lot of times other people have made me aware that this is a gender bias.
Hmm.
That, like sometimes I feel that, oh my god, I have not done this well.
Yeah.
And then I would come and discuss it with a friend who is not part of the organization, and they would be like, Acha, but what did they do it with? How did they do it with this person? And then they'll be like, don't you think this is probably related to gender? Or do you think this is related to gender? So I think a lot of times these things happens, but I think like a lot of misconceptions will always be there. A lot of biases, as you were talking about today, will always be there. Like
Yeah.
even we will have those biases, right? But the point is that, okay, the moment you realize this, that
Yeah.
okay, this is probably related to a gender, right?
Yeah.
The most immediate question that comes to my mind, what can I do about it? Can I
Exactly.
talk about it? Okay, in certain organizations you can very openly talk about it. Like you also have that rapport with your leaders, and your leaders also, you have the trust in your leaders that you can go and you can tell them what you felt honestly. Okay,
Hmm.
but in a lot of organizations it is not the case
Yeah.
that you can, like I don't think there are certain places where you can go and say कि यार ये ऊंची आवाज में क्यों बात करते हो? One of the things that irritates the
Mhm.
hell out of me is when people shout at other people, no
Mhm.
matter the gender. Like I think men are generally very sensitive about like not shouting at women, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that they do very frequently is shout at other men.
That is, again, that's bad for men.
Correct? That is very bad for men, but like that is something that it irritates me a lot. There's so many times when I've like kind of stopped meetings in between and told people ki yaar,
Yeah.
like let's all act in respect. And I think different people will have different kinds of these triggers,
These.
right? Some people would probably yearn for respect. So I think sometimes it is very important that you call it out then and there. But if you don't have that kind of a culture where all of this can be spoken about, like I think the starting point would be understanding that what is that culture.
Yeah.
Are you like, I think it is very important to assess all these things when you're interviewing with organizations,
Hmm.
and give this feedback to like the right set of people when you're leaving the organizations.
Exactly. I mean, like, that's a very good point. Even this is new to me, what you mentioned. Like, I also never gave a thought about this. And when you were talking about this type of thing, this one thing came in my mind that I feel, and I've observed this in my cohort as well. I feel like somehow people tend to take women less seriously. And it's just like, and for me, it happens now also. I've seen it happening many times, and I have to explicitly tell, like, no, this is my work experience. I've worked on this. I know how it is. So, do you feel this exists? Because I have seen that happening recently with me. I
Mm.
mean, like, it's like maybe I have to put more efforts to tell that what skills I have, what I mean, it just like I have to do it. Like I have to put this one extra effort, and it is assumed that the man. will have these skills. Like, you get my point, right? Like, this is something which I feel. And what do you think, how can we deal with this?
Yeah, I'll like, as much as I want to improve the world, one of the biggest lessons that I have come over this experience is choose people who are mature. Like, I would probably choose lesser money, but would want to work with people who are emotionally mature, right?
Yeah.
Who are probably like able to, who are like, who understand the nuances of the world, right? And I'll tell you a very simple philosophy, right? My parents spent so much money on my education. I spent so much like of my time and energy and hard work doing good thing in life. What good is it if I'm surrounded by such people?
Yeah.
So then I think the only hard work that I would want to put forward to is to be in a surrounding which is much better. So I have a very good story about it, okay? And I think it was during my sabbatical that I read it, and I keep telling this to everybody. So there was once this guy who had a watch. It was an old watch from his grandfather, and it was, I think it stopped working. Okay, so was thinking, where should I go? Should I sell it off? Should I go to watchmaker? So he
Yeah.
went to watchmaker. He said that, okay, I'll, like, you have to pay me, like, 1,000 rupees to get this fixed. Then he was like, oh, okay, let me go and figure out, can I sell it off somewhere? He went to some place. That person was like, okay, I'll give you 2,000 for it, nothing more, right? And then somehow we came across this guy who used to run an antiques museum.
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked this person, how much do I need to pay you so that you take it? And he was like, I'll pay you $10,000. Okay. So it is the exact same watch, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exact same watch being valued in a very different way in different surroundings, right?
Yeah.
So find the right surrounding for you. I
Yeah.
think your only job in life is to actually constantly keep working towards finding that right
The
surrounding
right surroundings.
where people can give you that respect, where people can make you flourish,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where you can help other people flourish. And yeah,
And
I
hopefully
think,
it influences more and more people, so that this thing never exists. Like,
yeah,
everyone is
but it
inspired.
becomes a norm. Like, a
Yeah.
lot of things have become a norm now. Like, for example, now the number of women who face situations like somebody asking them during an interview, are you married, has reduced a lot. Like, it has reduced a lot. And you know why it has happened? It has happened because certain organizations at certain point of time have fired people,
Yeah.
like, explicitly, who were doing these things, right? Only because one woman chose to call back and give this feedback to HR,
Yeah.
right? I've seen these kind of things happening in organizations over time. So there's a lot of trust and faith that I've also developed, that, there are people who are constantly trying to build better environments.
That makes sense. That's really enlightening, Sanchita. So, wrapping up, like, thank you so much for this discussion and the suggestion. I mean, if you could implement one practice or anything, like across the tech industry or maybe any industry, to improve the gender equity, or maybe, whatever we have discussed till now, what would it be? Like, anything?
Yeah, I think, like, and I think this, I've spoken a lot about this to many people. The only way women can get better positions is when they have skills,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
If I can do something, the first thing that I would try, because that's the base layer. If there are no skills, then the whole conversation goes for a toss,
Yeah.
right? It was only when I can prove that this person has competency and can actually, like, do great things, when the second set of problems will probably start to appear, and which are usually tactical. And I genuinely feel that when you start to become leader, you also learn to navigate things, how you were talking about negotiations, right? I
Yeah.
think a lot of us learn to, like, how to navigate those pathways
Yeah.
very easily if we can generate instances of somebody showing certain, like, caliber, right? So
Mm-hmm.
showing caliber is number one. That
Mm-hmm.
is like, and that can only come via improving the skills of the people. So working with these people so that they can actually uh, like really uplift their skills. And
Mm-hmm.
second is, how do you make work visible for these set of people?
Yeah.
And I think this is true. Like, I think this is something that, like, I have also lagged a lot, but I was also fortunate that somebody or the other highlighted. And also because I think both of us have also been in scenarios where we are organizing things which affect organization at large. So it is not a hidden work, right? But there are times when there are a lot of people who are doing work in silos, sitting somewhere doing it but not telling about it to others.
Mm-hmm.
Happens to a lot of women. Sometimes they do great work, but then they're not able to articulate and say that, okay, I did this work.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody else takes the credit for it, right? I think so. Then making work visible
Is
uh,
really important.
is very important. And I think there's certain easy practices around it. You can, I think, I think doing conferences, presentations,
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, etc., it is not only like true for women, but it is also true for men. Like, and this is something that I tell everybody.
Yeah.
How do you build in public? Like, if you have done something, how can you showcase it on LinkedIn or some of the forums where you can get feedback,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you can understand, genuinely understand from people what is it that you're lacking, right? When you build certain things in public, of course the risk is very high. You will have some trolling, some
Yeah.
people will come and say certain things. But when you get into that grind very early in your life, right, you practice. Like, that is one practice that I think, I really hope that over time people get to like implement. um, like, even if it's not as wide as social media, but like maybe a smaller forum where you can talk about things. I think there are
Yeah.
certain people who do things in like conferences. They would go and present things there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think a lot of people don't know. Today I'm doing so many like podcasts and stuff like that, but at one point of time, few of my presentations were rejected from really good PyCon or something like that, Hasgi conferences also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that I should stop doing these
No.
things? That
No.
is what gave me a chance to make my work visible, right? It gave somebody a chance so then, even if at that point of time somebody would type Sanchita.Kaushal, somebody would be able to see that, oh, this girl has actually submitted something to Hasgig,
Yeah.
right? So I think a lot of these small experiments which can make your work visible. And I think I'm not just talking about this from a personal perspective of the person who is trying to do work, very much from the perspective of the leader as well. So if there's one practice that I would want to introduce as a leader, I would actually figure out a way to make the work of this person visible, make this person responsible for something. Because the
Yeah.
best and the easiest way to make people's work visible is when they have to go and announce something
Yeah.
on a particular, release, or a particular uh, like deployment, etc., or when they take ownership of a certain initiative, right?
Yeah.
That's when you show the caliber to the wider org.
All goes. Yeah,
It's
definitely. So that's a very good. I think that's a very good suggestion and like the practice. And I'm sure you've been doing this, and it might encourage a lot of people. So yeah, thank you, Sanchita. I think we come towards end of interview. We recorded for 1 hour. We talked for 1 hour. I can't believe this, but yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much to you as well for inviting me.
Yes, I think I'll just end the recording now.